In an act of divine sovereignty, the Ministry of Education in Ukraine does allow the use of English theology books. Just arriving into Grand Rapids, and I wanted to send along a little story from the time that Evan and I spent in Ukraine, because I found it really heartening, and I hope that you've experienced it the same way. When Evan and I were in Ukraine, we took a night train to Kyiv in order to meet there with Valentin Sini. Valentin is a scholar leader. The ministry has engaged with him in lots of ways over the years, including through VSI and his school, Tavrisky Christian Institute in Kherson is the school that was overrun by the Russians within 2 weeks of the beginning of the war, and it was turned into an army barracks. Their library was burned. It was just an extraordinary desecration. And that notwithstanding, Valentin led his school into the Transcarpathian Mountains, where they immediately sent their vans to the front lines and started evacuating people with the support of many of you and our Ukrainian Relief Fund. He's been an extraordinary leader in his context, extraordinary visionary. From August, they were, of the first year of the war, they were providing online education to pastors, but they've also had a strong sense that it's important to start offering residential education again. So they have relocated, or they're in the process of trying to relocate to Kyiv and buy a new building there and rebuild their residential program. It's really a big deal for them to get this residential program rebuilt as soon as possible, because they're one of only 2 schools in Ukraine that's schools of Protestant theology that actually have a government license. That's a huge deal because it also means that they can then be building now towards getting an accredited undergraduate, and then a few years later, master's, and a few years later, doctoral program. It's an amazing opportunity for the country of Ukraine. And if you think about who you want training the next generation of theologians, it's precisely people like Valentin, who are the sorts of people that go towards the front lines when a war starts in order to live out the gospel. So Evan and I are meeting with them in Ukraine, in Kyiv, and one of the things that surfaces, one of their big needs, is that their library, which had been largely destroyed by the Russians, is unfortunately a limiting factor for their ability to move forward with their accreditation processes for the government. Because with each layer of additional accreditation, they need a larger number of books. What's more, in the past, most books in that part of the world that are theology books were written in Russian, because Russian was the lingua franca. And yet, since the war has started, the Ministry of Education no longer allows Russian language books to be used in the counts for accreditation purposes. And the really awful thing about this is that there simply aren't enough books in theology that have been written in Ukrainian to meet the quotas that they need to get accreditation, to maintain their accreditation standards for the government. But in an act of divine sovereignty, the Ministry of Education in Ukraine does allow the use of English theology books in the count. And by God's sovereignty, we all of a sudden, here in Grand Rapids, in a warehouse, have an answer to the needs of Tavrisky Christian Institute, a way to start rebuilding their library. What's more, just last week, our Director of Acquisitions, Scott Watson, was down in Springfield, Illinois, at the library of Lincoln Christian University, which has closed their theology library, and he pulled out 17,000 theology books, which has been packed up, and we're going to be working to get shipped to Tavriski Christian Institute and to Valentin. This is the kind of thing that only God could organize and bring about. We feel so grateful that TBN is now part of Scholar Leaders and that we have this new way to bless Valentin, to bless Tavriski Christian Institute.